All right, welcome to episode one of. I'm going to call it Stories with Shomik for now because I don't have a
Fair.
final title for it. Yeah, this is super exciting. We usually read, watch, and hear stories about celebrities in sports, business, entertainment, whatever it is, and there's an element of inspiration and there's stuff that makes you feel good, but there's so many amazing stories among the people and most don't talk about it. As we'll know from our guest soon, it took me a while to convince her to be on this show. Most people are either shy or don't think their stories are really worth being told, and I respectfully disagree with that. I'm surrounded by very cool and impressive people, and I insist that these stories are heard by more people. Our first guest on the show today has, I think it's an incredible story. She doesn't really think so, but hopefully we'll be able to convince her that she is awesome. This is a real life Swades story. Now, for those of you who don't know, Swades is a Bollywood movie featuring Shah Rukh Khan. He plays an engineer at NASA, which is my dream job. It's making bank, lives a very, very good life, gives it all up to go back to India and help build infrastructure to provide electricity to the most rural parts of the country. It's a feel good story and one of my favorite movies of all time. So if you haven't watched it, please check it out. But enough about Shah Rukh Khan. Our guest today is Ipshita Banerjee. This is a special episode, not only because it's the first one, not only because she has a cool story to tell, but also because she's my sister. Cousin, I guess, yeah, if you're being technical about it. Are we first cousins or second cousins?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay. Ipshita Banerjee is a board certified behavior analyst with an MEd in special education from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, USA, and has a master's in psychology from Delhi University. She began her career working with pre adolescents and teenagers on the spectrum with communication deficits and severe challenging behavior. She's been working with individuals with disabilities for 9 years, providing services ranging from early intervention to vocational skill development and community readiness. Her work has focused on behavior management, augmented and alternative communication systems, and teaching age appropriate functional skills. She is passionate about disseminating the science of ABA and special education strategies to support caregivers and professionals who play an important role in the life of an individual with special needs. Her research focuses on developing caregiver training, models, and bilingual interventions for individuals with communication deficits. And she's currently based out of Gurgaon in India. So, Ipshita, welcome. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Shomik, for having me.
This is if it's a little difficult for me right now, not only because this is the first time I'm running a podcast, but also because I'm used to calling Ipshita by her nickname, but I can't do that right now. She's a few thousand kilometers away from me, but I completely believe she will catch the next flight out to come and beat the shit out of me if I do. So,
That is
okay.
correct.
So, Ipshita, how did you end up in this space?
Good question. I wish I had a inspiring story to say, but I believe I just stumbled into it. My background was in psychology. So I did my undergrad and my postgrad in psychology. And somewhere along the line, I had an internship that I was supposed to do as part of my master's requirement, where I ended up working with young boy with autism, and we just clicked, and I thought it was fun, and I had a blast. And that was around the time when I was actually preparing to be a therapist and get into counseling and do my MPhil. And I reached a point where I realized that adults were complicated, it was stressful working with them. I have a lot of respect for people who provide therapy and who are within the field of clinical psychology and counseling. I just kind of started feeling like it wasn't meant for me. And then I had this internship when I worked with kids, and that just seemed like a better fit. I felt like I related to them more. There was something about the innocence and the playfulness that just seemed a little less stressful than the heaviness that comes with working with adults. So I decided to give it a shot. And I think till I started my first job, I wasn't actually sure that I'd like it. And like I said, I kind of stumbled into it. I finished my master's, and then, as it happens in India, I realized I didn't have a career after that. So I just picked up the first job that paid me a little bit more than what I was getting everywhere else, which ended up being a school in Gurgaon that was being set up to work with kids on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum. And it was a new school that was being set up. And they were having people who were flying in from US to train on this new therapy that I had not heard of called applied behavior analysis. So it sounded exciting, it sounded cool, and I gave it a shot. And within the first week of my job, I realized this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So just a happy coincidence, I'd like to believe.
That's incredible. That's amazing that you knew in a week that this is what you want to do. When I was 10, I wanted to be a truck driver, and since then, every year it has changed.
I remember your faces.
Right now, I want to be an
I
astronaut.
remember your faces.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course, you know them. Yeah, you've seen all the truck driver, rock star, moody
Mm-hmm.
man, all of it. Currently, I want to be an astronaut, but I think that ship has sailed. But we'll see. We'll see. So, okay, interesting. Thanks for sharing that. For those of us who don't really know anything about this space, let's begin with the basics. What is neurodivergence? I keep seeing it pop up on my Twitter feed. Every fourth tweet is about neurodivergence, and at this point,
Mm-hmm.
I'm too ashamed to admit I have no clue what that is. Can you tell us more about it?
I'll start off by saying there's no shame in saying that you don't know what neurodivergence is. I also believe the field that I'm in, language is important, but it's also challenging because it constantly develops. I just recently clarified a lot of misconceptions I had about the term neurodivergence. So I do want to preempt my response to this by saying, despite working in the field for so many years, I'm not an expert because I do not belong to the community of people with disabilities. I am someone who works with them, I advocate for them, but I'm very well aware of my position as being a typically developed neurotypical adult, and I want to respect the rights of people within the neurodivergent movement as well as individuals from the disability community to know that I'm not a voice for them. Saying that, so neurodivergence is basically a non-medical term. It's a social term that I believe was actually coined by a sociologist called Judy Singer. Yep, I think it was Judy Singer. But yeah, so it started off as a term that was used for people on the spectrum, and when I say on the spectrum, I mean people with autism and ADHD, and it was basically a less offensive non-medical term used to describe people who were atypical, who did not behave, think, process, respond to situations, or whose minds were did not cognitively process things the same way as a majority of people did. I believe that's where the term was coined, and now it's kind of expanded to include not just people on the spectrum or people with ADHD, but people with dyslexia, people with learning difficulties. And I believe in some circuits, because I'm seeing this a lot in India right now for sure, also people with mental health conditions as well, who may just have certain different patterns of thinking. So, to be absolutely honest, I'm not extremely confident in talking about what neurodivergence is and is not.
Fair.
But simply put, I think it encompasses different ways of thinking, different ways of perceiving the world, different ways of existing, and different, unfortunately, being defined as statistically as being not what comes into your bell shaped normal curve. So, that which is not typical.
Got it. Right. Cool. So tell me about when did you decide to go to the US to do your masters? What caused that?
So, I actually
Why the
actively,
US? Why not
yeah,
anywhere
yeah.
else? Or why not?
Good question. It was a big decision for me to go to the US. I think for a large part of my life, I was I think I grew up in the generation where brain drain was taught to us. So I was one of those people who believed that leaving my country and going outside for education meant that I was wasting my talent, and that, India had everything that it needed to offer me. So I went ahead, and I do believe I had a pretty solid education, and I really enjoyed my undergrad and masters in psychology. It was after I started my first job, first proper job with the organization that I mentioned before. Like I said, I absolutely fell in love with the job, and we had some fantastic training. And I was working essentially with children with very severe needs. So children on the autism spectrum who had, these were older students who had very severe problem behaviors. They had severe communication deficits. They were amazing, amazing, wonderful individuals to work with, and I learned a lot. However, there came a point where I felt like I understood autism, and I all of my education so far made me understand how to teach and understand what the child was going through, but it wouldn't tell me what to teach. So I kind of had the strategies in my training in the organization, and applied behavior analysis really made me a really good interventionist. So I knew how to teach a particular skill, how to really control and manage behavior. But I started hitting a point where I could not figure out how to really package the content that needed to be taught in a different way. That's when I stumbled upon the field of special education. And then the more I researched within India, I didn't really get the specific kind of program that I was looking for. I was looking for something that would allow me to specialize for individuals with more severe disabilities. A lot of programs that I saw in India cater to learning disabilities or ADHD, or what are otherwise known as high incidence disabilities. Disabilities that you see more often, that are more visible. A lot of schools do have a lot of kids who are diagnosed with learning disabilities and ADHD. But the individuals that I am more passionate about working are the individuals that you don't see in the community. These are our kiddos are not seen in the community. You don't see them in the malls. You don't see them in the parks. You definitely don't see them in the schools. So I kind of wanted to learn more and like equip.
And why is that? Why do we not see them so much?
Oh, variety of reasons I'd like to believe. I think it's a combination of course, first challenge being stigma, right? Like, "Aapka bacha pagal hai" is the first thing you hear. Even now, when I try and explain to a non-English speaking person what autism is, I find myself struggling because there is no Hindi word for me to explain autism, or if there is, I'm not
Mm.
familiar with it. So it boils down to me trying to explain, हाँ मैं ऐसे बच्चों के साथ काम करती हूँ जो थोड़े अलग है, and I try and explain difference, and I struggle with finding politically correct words to explain
Right.
neurodivergence or different ways of thinking, but it all boils down to आप पागल बच्चों के साथ
Mm.
काम करते हैं, which is basically the mindset that I'd like to say still exists. I do think we're improving. I've seen a huge change in the level of awareness even over the last 5 years while I've been away. But yeah, I would say primary number one is stigma. Number two, lack of resources. So even kids don't get diagnosed. When they do get diagnosed, what next? Parents don't have spaces to take them
Right.
to. There is a huge, huge lack of qualified professionals to work with individuals with special needs. There are no safe places for them to go to. So even if you do have your child attending a school, there are no inclusive spaces. The community does not know. We don't know as a community how to respond to a person with special needs. We don't know how to create a safe
Mm.
environment for them. So what is the solution? Your child is safer at home, away from the people who are dangerous to them, right? So it's a combination of stigma where obviously families feel a lot of shame and guilt in taking their child out because there are fingers that are pointed at them. The child's mannerisms or like difficulties in adapting to the world are seen as parental, as a fault of the parent, versus understanding that this is just something that the child struggles with. So
Right.
it's a lot for families and parents to deal with, right? And like I said, also, where are they going to take their children? It's the only the big cities that are equipped with therapists or special schools that do have the expertise in working with individuals with special needs. So yeah, that's probably why we don't see as many neurodivergent adults or children as we'd like to see in the community. But yeah, so that's kind of
Interesting.
what motivated me to go abroad and find a course, because I realized I wanted to specialize working with individuals with severe disabilities, and there wasn't anything in India that met my need. So I had to look at the US.
Interesting. Honestly, I didn't know anything. Thank you for sharing this. This is very very interesting for me to know. I always find it very interesting when, like, I haven't heard the term brain drain in a while, and that took me back because I remember very clearly it was like one of these family get-togethers we were at, and we were discussing going abroad to study, and you were very like vocal about, I'm staying here. I don't want to go. And I was the opposite. I was like, hell yeah, I want to go. I want to see the
Yep.
rest of the world. I do want to go abroad. I want to meet people from all over the world. And,
Yep.
eventually we both ended up going abroad, but for different reasons. I came because I was like, yeah, absolutely. I want to go. But another important difference between you and I is you're a nerd. You've always been extremely smart and very hardworking. And you went on a full ride for your master's in the US.
I mean, I will. I never know how to respond to that. You're embarrassing me right now, but
Well, the answer is yes, you did. And that's
yes,
amazing.
I did. But I also want to point
I'm
out
proud.
that I also am aware. So, like, just I want to talk a little bit more about this whole decision to go to the US, right? Like I mentioned, it was something as a teenager and as a young 20 something I was very opposed to, till I was pushed into a corner in my career when I realized there was literally no other option but for me to
Right.
do this if I wanted to continue doing what I was doing, not even from a career point of view. So me getting this added credential did not matter. I don't think it still matters, but like I left for the
Mm.
US because I wanted the knowledge. And I feel that is something that the
Right.
field pushed me towards, right? Like it put me in a place where I realized that I'd hit a wall with my kids. There was only so much I could do. And then there was no one
Yeah.
within the country or within my organization that was going to be able to answer the questions that I had. And I think that pushed me. But going back to the full ride
Right.
thing, there was also a very, what should I say, like strong realization of the fact that it's a privilege to go abroad,
100%.
especially because I knew that I wanted to come back. So for most of us, when we go abroad to study, I know that you have to take loans.
Yeah.
Special education is still viewed as a social service
Yeah.
in India. It's not an established career. It's not a career that people necessarily choose for themselves. You are seen as some noble person who is doing this out of the goodness of your heart.
Yes.
It's something that I still hear
Yeah.
where people think it's a stopgap thing that I'm doing. People have a hard time. My family has a hard time realizing that this is a career I have chosen for myself.
Right.
And I can understand. I can understand the hesitation for it. But the fact is, it's not a paying field.
Yeah,
It's not a
it's
regulated
like it's
sector.
one of those things where people who do it are either from a socio-economic background where they can afford to do this and it doesn't impact their
Right.
lifestyle, or they're people
Correct.
from not that socio-economic background and like this is their best way out. There's no in between.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right, because that's one of the challenges that I'm learning to grapple with now, of how to figure out how to make this a viable career option where I know I'm in it because my heart is in it, but at the same time, I don't want to be living off my parents for the
Right.
rest of my life. So it was that realization that also kind of guided my, what should I say, drive to make sure I went on a full ride, because I knew I'd never be able to pay off my loans. I would spend the next 70 years of my life paying back for my education abroad.
Right.
So I just also want to say that I know that how privileged I am to have gone and received this education abroad, because I'd like to believe there are a lot more like-minded people out here who are as passionate and probably as skilled in doing what I do right now. But I know that I was very privileged to have had the opportunity to go and like not upscale, sorry, upskill myself to make sure that I was that I could be better at my job.
That is That is honestly, yeah, I remember when we talked about it and you said you were going. And even then, and at that point, I was like, oh, great, you're going to the US. You're all set. And you're like, no, no, I'm going to come back. And at that point, me and another cousin who's also in the US, so you know who I'm talking about, both of us were like,
Yeah.
no, she's going to stay. Once you're in the US for a while, and or rather, once you're in whatever North America or outside of your home country for a while, you kind of get used to it. And so
You and pretty much everyone else in my life,
yeah, yeah, like
I would say
we were like
90% of people
I,
believe that I wouldn't come back.
exactly, like I was super confident that you would stay in the US and build a career out there. But honestly, yes, you're right, it is a privilege to be able to study abroad. We are very lucky that we got the opportunity. But the difference between you and I is you did it for one, to genuinely upskill yourself and add value to the people around you. I just took the debt to go and see a new part of the world that I hadn't seen before. Had a great time, don't get me wrong, and I've definitely built a community.
But you're in a career where
Yeah,
you could afford to do
absolutely,
that. That's
absolutely.
also reality. Like I don't know whether my decision would have been impacted different if I was in a
Yeah.
different
Oh,
career.
fair. That is completely fair. Yeah. Yeah.
It's really hard.
I knew that at some point I'd make up the money that I spent
Yeah.
on business school. Business school is not cheap. If you decide to go to school, hit me up. I'm happy to chat. But no, that is very, very interesting. So at what point did you decide, when you started the program, did you have a timeline on when you want to go back, or did that happen after you finished the program? What was the thought process there?
So I think I was pretty determined from the day I gave my GRE that I don't think I've ever been this determined about anything in my life. I know I've known to be stubborn, but I think this has
Yes.
been the first time when I've actually followed through so much. From the day I gave my GRE, I knew that I was going abroad, going to the US with a single-minded goal to do this specific certification. I was very clear on the number of schools I was going to apply to because there was one specific course I wanted to do. So I limited my applications to just 5 schools, despite being told that apply to 8 to 10. And I was like, nope, this is the only thing I want to study, and either I do this or I don't do this at all. So I was pretty determined from day one, of even before going, that I knew I wanted to come back. I wanted to come back the minute I graduated. So in my mind, I had planned, even from the day I started my program, I had just planned that I would just stay as long as my graduation ceremony and then come back. But COVID happened, and that, of course, screwed up
That
all my
changed.
plans. Yeah. So, which I guess, like, probably helped in combating some of my stubbornness, because everyone had told me to stay for a year to get a little bit of experience before coming back, and I was just being very bullheaded about saying no. If I stay longer, I'll get tempted to stay there. I must pack my bags and come back. And as it happened, because of COVID, I did end up staying 1 year on my OPT and getting some work experience that I feel was extremely valuable and gave me some time to really prepare and plan for what I was going to do when I came back. So, yeah, so I basically ended up staying exactly a year after I graduated, and then I came right back.
Yeah, and then I came to Nashville and saw you
Yeah, you did.
for one evening.
This is true.
Honestly, the fact that you lived in Nashville and decided to give that up and go back makes your decision all the more impressive. I was there for a day and a night, and I was ready to make it my home. Actually, in 30 seconds, I knew I wanted to make this my home. So,
Okay, I'm going to admit that it wasn't the easiest decision, and it's not like I miss Nashville. As you know, I did absolutely love Nashville. I loved working in the US as well. I think the intellectual stimulation, the kind of colleagues I had, the mentorship, the work that I did, the kids that I met, they were all really, really hard giving up as well.
mhm.
So it wasn't an easy decision, but also wasn't that hard. I feel like it was like I went knowing that I was going to come back. So the entire time that I was there, it was like kind of the feeling of making the most out of this experience, knowing I'll always be in touch with people there, knowing that I always have an option of, like, I don't know, finding ways to keep myself engaged with the community and the relationships and the friends that I've developed there. But it wasn't that hard coming back, because I knew that there was a bigger reason why I wanted to come back. And that was like on my study table every morning. Like, I had pictures of my kiddos from back home as a good reminder to make sure that I didn't get tempted to
I
stay
love
there
it.
and that I wanted to come back here. But it wasn't that hard. I mean, it's. I think
I
it's just
love
like
that.
any of those life choices that you do. It was a career move that I knew I wanted to make.
For sure. For sure. No, I love that. It is super inspiring. I love it. This I remember when I decided, like, okay, I'm going to create a podcast and like talk to very very cool people. And I messaged you, and if you give me permission at some point in the show notes, I want to put the screenshot of our chat where I said, hey,
I will
hey, I
smack
think
you.
you should be okay. So no screenshot in the show notes. That's fine. But it
No.
was effectively just, I said, hey, I think you should be the first guest because you're cool. And you said, I don't think I have a story to tell. And it blew my mind. And it also blew my mind because I also messaged a few other people who have different stories that I also think are very cool. And 7 out of 8 said the same thing, the same exact words. I don't have a story to tell. Obviously, I think that's the biggest load of bullshit I've heard in a long time.
So I want to talk about that because I know I was trying to
Yeah.
explain my perspective on that. I do believe everyone has a story. I think everyone's story, each and every one of us have a story, and it's like your
Yeah.
favorite line, right? Who are we without our stories? I think there's inspiration to be sought in each person's journey.
Source credit to
But
our
I
other
think the
sister
minute
who
you
introduced us. Our family is just
absolutely,
brilliant. I think
absolutely,
everyone's
I
just
think it's
every person is just
our
too
family
cool.
is talented. But I think the minute you ask someone to share their story, at least for me, okay, for me personally, it's an added pressure, it's an added expectation that it's a little bit of imposter syndrome where you're like, but wait, there are people who've done cooler things, and why should my story be shared? I'd rather that someone who's achieved more in life or is doing, so much of great stuff, like people who I'm inspired by, like their stories should be shared. So I think it's a little natural, because it kind of, it's hard for us to believe that, or it's stressful for me to think that I could inspire someone else. It makes me feel a little like, I don't know, it's like a slightly outer body experience where I'm like, no, but this is what I do. Why would someone else seek inspiration from this? And if they do, like, I don't know if I want to know about it, or I don't know if I want to know about it on a formal platform, because it just somehow feels like I need to then follow a certain trajectory to continue to inspire other people. And I just feel like the pressure becomes higher. So I'd rather do what I do, love doing what I do, and then just like stay in my own little corner doing that and shy
I
away from
hear
the
you.
limelight.
I hear you. There's a story on imposter syndrome that Neil Gaiman shared. And Neil Gaiman, is also one of the most popular authors of the current times. And it blew my mind. He basically talks about his he was at a dinner for very well respected people who've achieved a lot in their respective fields, and he was talking to his namesake there, and the guy said, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing here with all these people. And he was like, but you're Neil Armstrong, you went to the moon. So everybody feels imposter syndrome. If
That's
the
true.
first man to the moon feels imposter syndrome, if one of the best authors in the world feels imposter syndrome, who are we, right? Like, so it is very normal, but at some point we need to fight through it, and that is where the
And I
magic
think
happens.
like how I managed to finally change my mind is, if at all someone does get inspired from this in terms of other people within our country jumping into this field, then hey, why not? Because that's why I came back as well, right? We need more people to work with our
Yeah.
kiddos. So if anyone out there wants to go abroad,
I think you're highly overestimating the reach of this podcast. It's likely going to be you, me, and
you never know.
four
You
members
never
of our
know.
family who
Maybe with the
listen to it.
four members of our family, maybe one of our nephews or nieces could get motivated to take up this field, and that would make me happy. If I could
Yeah,
even change, I know I just
yeah,
spoke about not wanting to inspire anyone, but even if I can convince one more person to get into this fabulous field and meet
yeah.
these amazing individuals that I work with, then that'll make me happy.
I love that. Yeah, I know you don't want to inspire people, but you've already inspired a lot of people, whether you know it or not. One of them being myself. But okay, anyway, we've this we've had a nice wholesome exchange. Tell me about the plan in India. You're back there, you've settled in. What are you working on?
Yeah. Rewind a little bit. I don't know if I got to talk about why I was so stubborn about coming back. I don't want to make it into a very, I mean, I don't know how to talk about it and explain it the way it makes sense to me. It was very simple. I think when you do the work that we do, my field requires a certain amount of emotional connect with the people and the families that we work with. And it was just a harsh reality that there
Yeah,
were kids that we wanted to work with that we couldn't because there weren't enough resources. The fact that we always had kids on wait list just broke my heart, and it just made me realize how ill equipped we were to provide someone with their basic rights. And I'm not even just talking about right to like education, I'm just talking about it like a right to live a life of dignity. That bothered me a lot. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to come back to a country where we still have a long way to go
yeah,
before we are able to provide that basic dignity or basic right to living a life that you are entitled to. And just like huge scope. I think, like I said, I was just, it was a very emotional decision for me to leave the students and the families that I work with. But I had to convince myself. It took me 4 years to quit my job because it was really hard for me to separate myself. Fast forward to your question now, that's why I came back because I feel there's a huge need. I feel like there's a lot that we can do, and it's almost like a twofold decision. So what I've been doing over the past whatever couple of months since I've got back is really trying to figure out what are the different areas of needs and narrow down and focus on what is it that I'd like to be able to contribute to right now. There are 10 different battles that I want to pick, but I've managed to zero it down to like two specific things that I want to start off and then gradually take it from there. I've been really fortunate to have a colleague who actually two colleagues who I ended up connecting with while I was in the US. And all three of us were in similar phases in our lives where we had worked in the field for several years, we had left, we had studied, and then we kind of reached a point where we wanted to provide certain services and we wanted to do things in a way where there were no organization that existed that either did what we wanted to or wanted to do it the way that we wanted to or work with the specific population that we wanted to. So three of us kind of got together and we've been in touch over the past couple of, I want to say like 2 years. So what I'm doing right now is I've started off an organization with one of these colleagues of mine called Project I.
yes,
There are, yay, coming to Project I. So little snapshot of what we're trying to do is we work with neurodivergent individuals, and Project I primarily stands for identity, and like the other three I's that are important to us are inclusion, individualization, and interaction. I'm not going to get into boring details about all of this. I will share my
hey, this is
website.
not boring.
Well, I'll share
This
my
is
social
incredible.
media page and wait for an
Please do.
official launch for what we do. But right now, it's almost like a two pronged approach that we have towards the work that we want to do. If I had to encapsulate what my philosophy of work right now is, it's to kind of prepare the child for the world and prepare the world for our child.
I love
So one prong of what we do is providing services. We're trying to work with the particular age group and population of individuals with special needs who are not currently receiving services or are not receiving services that cater to their needs. So we've, based on our market research and our conversation with parents and families, these are your pre-teen to teen and young adult age group. So I would say maybe like 10 and above. These are our young adults and teenagers who are hitting puberty, who are having a lot going on, who don't necessarily have the communication skills or the self-regulation skills to be able to manage all the changes that are coming with them, and also just prepare for like adulthood and life, which is hard. So one thing that we're starting to do is start like a life skills post school program working with our young adults and adolescents, really focusing a lot on emotional regulation and like basic life skills like how to interact with your peers, how to
Yeah.
keep yourself busy at home, how to go make a snack, and just like be a teenager or be an adult and have fun doing it. So that's kind of one specific avenue that I'm working in, is to develop this program with my colleague, and it's super exciting. Other thing that both of us are really excited about is both of us strongly and firmly believe that there's a need for capacity building There are a lot of wonderful people out there who want to work in the field, and like I said, who just may not have the opportunity to go abroad and study. Both me and my colleague have been privileged enough to have been trained by wonderful, wonderful mentors abroad,
Okay.
and we'd like to believe that we do have something to offer back. We are in a position to at least provide some basic amount of training and skill building amongst therapists and other professionals in the field. So a lot of what we want to work on is conducting trainings, workshops, creating coursework for not just people who want to work in our field, but also what we call stakeholders, that is, other important people in our children and neurodivergent individuals' lives. So, parents, caregivers, the didis and bhaiyas who work with them, the shopkeepers who are interacting with them on a regular basis, the salons that they're going to. So, kind of just talking about just preparing our community for our children, because it's like a two-way process. There's a lot that our kiddos and our young adults have to offer, and it's just about figuring out how to make
Yeah,
this interaction most meaningful for them. Kind of working on how can we create this two-way street where we teach neurodivergent individuals to find ways to transition into a community
for
which is
sure.
not yet fully prepared to understand and
Yeah,
understand their true value and really know how to meaningfully engage with them, but also simultaneously work a little bit on preparing the community, because it just
absolutely.
seems fair that it
Absolutely.
should be a two-way
I
street.
love that. I'm so happy and proud that you're doing this. A lot of people talk, everyone has ideas and suggestions. More people have complaints about things not changing, about things not moving. At the end of the day, we move forward as a society by the five people that actually do something about it. We need the early adopters, right? And
So I get where you're coming from, and but I also still argue that everyone has a contribution to make, towards making people's lives better. So you guys are making people's lives better in a different way. I know that it's. I mean, I honestly feel uncomfortable when someone gives me this sort of attention, because it makes me feel like I don't know, like it makes me feel like I'm being put on a pedestal, and I don't want to. I don't want to feel that way, because.
don't worry, I'm your brother. I'm never putting you on a
That
pedestal.
is true as well. But yeah, I think it just comes down to, I feel like everyone we're all working towards something. We're all working towards things that we're passionate about. I just consider myself to have been really fortunate to love what I do. I do have a lot of friends who hate what they do, but they do it for the money.
Yeah,
And I just think I got lucky that the career that I picked,
fair.
I really, really like what I do. And so far the motivation has been to continue to stay in the same field, but also saying that I do know that it's like one step forward, three steps back. It's a very challenging field.
Yeah,
I have a lot of respect, and I think another thing that guides me to stay in the, I think the real champions are the families and the people and the advocates for people from the community. I think we just are like a small, small part. We play a very small part in doing what we do
yeah,
for individuals with special needs. But I think the real people who motivate me every single day are the parents that I interact with, and to know how much they are ready to go above and beyond to make sure that their kids get the life that they deserve. So I think that's really inspiring, and I think that's what's cool about my field that you don't get, is that you get a lot of reinforcement
I
from
love
the
that.
families that you work with. You get a lot of real life inspirational stories that keep you going. I think every parent that I meet is rewarding. I think every child or every individual that I've worked with has been just incredible and great in their own right. And yeah, it's just it's a fun space. It's a fun field to be in.
I love that. I love that. I'm hyped. I'm pumped for you. I Okay, tell us this. How can we get involved? How can we help?
Go read up about neurodivergence. Go read out about autism. Go find out about why your respective organization. Oh, first go and find out, do your organizations employ people with disabilities? If yes, great. What is the percentage and what can you do to get involved? If not, find out why. Go champion and figure out why are they not doing that, and what can you do to make your workplace a better fit for neurodivergent adults. There's no reason why they can't be working with you. Go find a person with neurodivergence and talk to them. Go find a person who's different from you and try and have a conversation with them
Yeah.
to know more about it. I mean, yeah, if you're in India, look us up, see what we do, find out ways in which we can collaborate with you. But I'd rather
That's
talk
awesome.
about getting, if you're talking specifically about India, I'd rather get to a state where all of us can at least know one neurodivergent adult. And I don't mean this from a fascinating point of view to be like, oh my
Right.
god, I know
Yeah.
someone who's got autism
Of
and
course.
they're so cool. But I mean just from a way to be like, we need to like really be a more inclusive society. I am ashamed to know that I have very few friends who are neurodivergent, and that's something that I'm actively changing. I just don't want to
Yeah.
be a therapist to individuals with disabilities. I actually want to talk to people who are advocates of the field and understand what their point of view is, so that that could make me a better therapist. So that would be my 2 cents.
That is amazing. I love that. Also, while you're physically setting up Project I, how can
Hmm.
someone like me sitting in Canada or someone in the US or someone who's not in India right now support that?
Stay tuned, trying to figure that out. We're still trying to register ourselves as a company, so I need to figure out what are the ways in which we can possibly receive monetary donations. That would be the
Yeah,
best way to support us right now. But the minute I figure that out, I will share that with you, and you can share it with your listeners. Any kind of support would be welcome, whether monetary or just a shout out to know that, or just like sharing our social media page, or just
yeah,
getting people connected with us. So I don't really have an answer to that right yet because we're in our early stages of setting up our organization. But once I do, I'll share the details with you.
yeah. Absolutely. I'll put all the social media handles in the show notes as well, and obviously I have 1,000 followers on Twitter, so I will tweet it out.
That's
And
excellent. Let's see how long your Twitter account stays active, or whether you get kicked out or
I
not.
mean, hey, I am not leaving that platform unless like something much worse happens.
Could it be any worse? But anyway.
That's not a rhetorical question. The way things are going right now sounds more like a challenge.
Hmm.
But no, I love that platform. But we'll see what happens. I also have 700 followers on Instagram, of which I think 150 is
Great.
y- we have in common, which is just our family. Um, uh, we have a very big
So
family.
as and
We are
when I
very
start,
spread out,
yeah,
and we're huge.
yeah, as and when I get more active on social media for the work that we do, just go ahead and post. At this point, awareness, conversations,
Yeah,
dialogue is what we need. Like I said, I think I'm second guessing every single word that I've said in this conversation with you, because I constantly feel like I need to know more. I need to check my tone and my language and the way I talk about people I work with in order to be more respectful for them, and so respectful towards them. And I feel like the only way that can be done is through conversation and dialogue. And the only way that can be started is if we actually give
yeah,
people something to talk about.
I
So
love that.
let's open up more
Yeah,
dialogue
and the
with
journey never
things that
ends,
we're
right? Like
uncomfortable
there's
about.
always something new to be learned,
Hmm.
and information will keep changing, the science keeps updating, and there'll always be more to learn, more to figure out, and that's part of the process. But we do we do the best we can with the information that we have. And I think you've been absolutely amazing today.
That is
As
true.
much as you're second guessing yourself, I think you were awesome. I couldn't have asked for a better
Thank
first
you so
guest.
much.
Everyone else will now have to up their game. And yeah, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
You are most welcome. Thank you for taking time to hear my story. And I am hopefully going to be a little bit more confident in talking about it in the future. So
Wait,
thanks for giving me
okay,
the chance
so
to talk
just for
about
the
what I
record,
do.
this is the first time, first whatever platform you're talking about Project I. Okay, so this is a
Yeah.
special one. This is a first for both of us.
This is a special one because you're my brother. So you get
I
first
love that.
dibs on knowing about. We aren't even launched on social media
I love
yet. So
that.
technically, this podcast is the first time I've mentioned Project I. We're going to be launching in a couple of days. So you're the first one who gets to hear about Project I.
Exciting, exciting. I am pumped. I am hyped. All the best. You know,
Thank you so
you are
much.
amazing. Your team is amazing. You're all going to do phenomenal things. I will help any and every way I can. And
I appreciate that. Thank you for putting together this podcast series. I think I look forward to hearing your other guests. I think it's exciting. I think it's something new. I mean, yeah, I think it's a great initiative. Apart from just keeping you
yeah,
busy,
it's
I think it's actually a great
I
initiative.
actually don't even know if this is new. I did zero research on a market. I was just like, okay, I like talking to cool people. I'm just going to record it and put it out into the internet, and someone will listen to it maybe. This is the most unplanned project I've ever done. Though, to be fair, most of my projects start this way. And then
It'll
we'll
go
figure it out as
great.
we go.
Sometimes the most
I'm
unplanned.
this The main
Yeah,
objective for me
absolutely.
is to learn something new and have fun with it. I learned a lot today and I had fun, so it stick those objectives. Everything else is a bonus. Amazing. All right. Thank you so much, Ipshita. Thank you so much to the four people who are
Thank
going to
you,
listen to
Shomik.
this. And I look forward to having you back again with your co founder at some point once we have more information, and
Yeah,
hopefully it'll be a very, very exciting update to it.
sounds great. Thanks for having us.